After spending more than 11 years on death row, Matthew Johnson was executed by lethal injection in Texas State Prison on May 20th, 2025. His crime was so brutal and heartless, it's hard to understand how anyone could inflict that kind of pain on another human being. This video covers everything from his final meal to his last words. But before we get there, we need to go back to the early morning hours of Sunday, May 20th, 2012, the moment everything changed. Matthew Johnson, a bottle of fluid, a convenience store, and a 76-year-old woman starting her usual Sunday morning shift. What follows is a casual display of cruelty so shocking it still haunts jurors more than a decade later. This is the cruel story of Matthew Johnson. While Garland, Texas was asleep, Matthew Johnson set out to commit a robbery and make some quick cash. Just after sunrise, he walked toward the Fina Whippin convenience store, casually carrying what looked like an ordinary plastic bottle. His targets were simple: some cash, a few packs of cigarettes, and the person standing in his way. With those objectives in mind, Johnson pushed through the glass door and stepped inside, the bottle of unknown fluid still swinging from his hand. Nancy Harris had done this shift 100 times before, coffee brewing, stocking shelves, handing out change with a smile, a routine she knew well. What she wasn't aware of was that when Johnson's shadow falls across the linoleum floor, her life will end in unimaginable torture. Johnson moved directly behind the counter and stood uncomfortably close to Harris. Without a word, he raised the plastic bottle and poured lighter fluid over her head, soaking her hair, face, and clothes. In a state of shock, Harris froze as Johnson calmly demanded she open the register. As she fumbled with the register, Johnson wandered through the store, taking his time as if it were all just part of his routine. But Johnson wasn't just there for money. As Harris struggled with the register, he casually plucked 2 cigarette lighters from a display, grabbed a pack of smokes from an overhead rack, and with unnerving calmness, he took her ring from her finger, licking his own to make it easier to slip off. After clearing the register of just $80, Johnson ignited the fuel-soaked woman and watched as flames spread on her body. As Harris ran screaming toward a sink, desperately trying to extinguish the flames, Johnson didn't flee in panic. He strolled to the exit, stopping to pocket candy from a display rack before stepping into the morning light. Harris fought a losing battle against the flames eating away at her flesh. She ripped off her burning shirt, but the flames clung to her bra, still tormenting her. As she bent over the sink in a desperate attempt to escape the flames, her discarded shirt ignited her pants as well. There was no way to escape the fire. Neighbors heard her screams as she stumbled outside, her body still burning until she collapsed in the parking lot. Officers Billy Coffey and Anthony Simon happened to be nearby when they noticed flames inside the store. Coffey immediately grabbed a fire extinguisher and put off the flames while Simon called for emergency medical services. A firefighter flagged down by police found Harris with severe burns on her face, shoulders, stomach, arms, and legs. She was in intense pain, pleading for help over and over again. Harris stayed conscious on the way to the hospital, but her airway started to swell shut. By the time they arrived, doctors had to intubate her immediately. Amid the unbearable pain, Harris managed to describe her attacker as a heavy-set black man. The officers immediately set up a perimeter around the neighborhood behind the store, hoping to catch the suspect before he could escape. Meanwhile, Johnson walked through the quiet neighborhood behind the store. Just half a block away, a man named Medley stepped outside. His dog had started barking and something felt off. That's when he noticed police cars lining the street. Looking back at his driveway, he noticed his garbage bin had been moved and the gate to his garage was wide open. Then he spotted something odd in the driveway: an open pack of cigarettes. Medley didn't smoke, When he picked them up to toss them in the trash, he noticed a t-shirt inside the bin. It was light-colored, short-sleeved, and definitely not his. As Medley tried to piece together what was going on, he looked up and saw a shirtless black man pushing a bicycle away from his property. Later, another neighbor had a similar encounter. A shirtless man with black-rimmed glasses showed up at his front door. His eyes were wide and intense. He said he needed help, but before the resident could react, the man tried to force his way inside. When that didn't work, the man shoved the resident to the ground, grabbed his glasses, and ran. About an hour after Harris was set on fire, officers spotted Johnson in the neighborhood. After a brief chase, officers tackled Johnson and quickly handcuffed him. He didn't resist. In fact, he looked right at them and said, "What took you so long? Y'all are getting slow." In his pockets, they found Harris's ring, a couple of cigarette lighters, some candy from the store, and $76 in cash. While Johnson sat in the back of a police car, trying to make small talk with the officers, Nancy Harris was in the fight of her life at Parkland Hospital's burn unit. More than 40% of her body was covered in 2nd to 4th degree burns. Her face, shoulders, abdomen, upper arms, and legs were all severely injured. Despite morphine drips and cooling treatments, the pain was unbearable. After his capture, Johnson acted in a way that seemed to show no understanding of the consequences of his actions. "What am I being booked for, man?" he asked Officer Coffey casually. When told he's charged with attempted capital murder, Johnson responds, "Attempted capital murder of who?" Although Nancy Harris was on a ventilator and unable to speak, she communicated by nodding her head and spelling words in the air with her fingers. A nurse testified that on May 23, 2012, Harris, in critical condition and unable to speak, spelled out a heartbreaking question: "Am I going to die?" When the nurse explained the treatments keeping her alive, Harris shook her head. She didn't want them. After a meeting with doctors and her family, they made the difficult decision to stop treatment. On May 25, 2012, Nancy Harris passed away. She was taken off life support and died from her injuries. In court, prosecutors laid out Johnson's criminal history in full detail. He had previous convictions for aggravated assault, robbery, trying to grab a police officer's gun, biting officers, carjacking, leading police on a high-speed chase, and even exposing himself to a hotel maid while grabbing her hand. But one of the most revealing accounts came from his ex-girlfriend, Amy Armstrong. She testified that when they first met in 1993, Johnson seemed sweet and was good with her children. But that quickly changed. One day, while she was holding her 2-year-old daughter, Johnson struck her during an argument. The blow hit both her and the child. After that, Armstrong refused to let him back into the house. Johnson threatened to break down the door. She locked herself inside with a gun and hid her children in a closet. Not long after, Johnson set a rug and a piece of wood on fire in her garden. In court, Johnson blamed his behavior on alcohol and drugs. He said he had been partying at a wedding the night before entering the gas station, smoked crack all night, took Xanax at dawn, and finished a bottle of wine by 6 a.m. But when officers arrested him, Johnson only mentioned using cocaine and drinking a couple of beers. He didn't bring up the crack, the Xanax, or the wine. Later, he said it just felt irrelevant at the time, adding that he was intoxicated. Johnson also claimed he brought the lighter fluid only to scare Nancy Harris, with no intention to ignite it. Johnson argued Harris backed away from the register at first, but then stepped toward him again while he was grabbing the money. Holding a lighter, he warned her to stay back and flicked it once, hoping it would scare her. According to him, it didn't. When that didn't work and she reached across him, he panicked and flicked it again, this time accidentally setting her on fire. The jury didn't buy it. After less than 2 hours, they sentenced Matthew Johnson to death. For Nancy Harris's family, no punishment could ever make up for what their mother endured. Being soaked with lighter fluid, set on fire and left to die by a man who stopped for candy on his way out. Johnson tried to fight the sentence. In his appeals, he claimed the trial wasn't fair. He argued that evidence had been mishandled, that certain statements violated his rights, and that he wasn't fully in control of his actions. Despite these efforts, all appeals were denied. The death sentence stood. While Johnson's case is hard to comprehend, there's another man who didn't just end one life, but claims to have killed 70 people. Check out Glenn Rogers' case, his last words, and final meal here.